Hello everyone. Today we're going to talk about the fantasy drama film, Mr. Harrigan's Phone. A lot of interesting things are waiting for you. Enjoy your viewing. The movie begins with the main character, Craig, talking about his home. It's a picturesque village with a few of the best spots. Nothing much happens here, and all the people are boring. From his story, we learn that Craig moved from Harlow in the present tense and talks about the time he spent there as a child in the early 2000s. He also talks about the strange events he went through in his hometown. The film then goes back in time to reveal that Craig lost his mother when he was a young boy. For some reason, he still blames himself for this. Next, we meet the local billionaire and richest man in Harlow, Mr. Harrigan. Being a devout Christian, he regularly attends church and prays to God. One day he saw Craig telling a story, and he was very impressed. That evening, Mr. Harrigan came to Craig's house with a proposal. He wants the boy to read him all kinds of books because Harrigan is losing his eyesight. In return, Craig will receive $5 an hour for his service. Not surprisingly, the boy agrees without any hesitation. On the first day of work, Craig is amazed to see the billionaire's luxurious villa. It seems to have all the luxury imaginable. But despite the fact that it has more than 50 rooms, there are only 2 residents, a gardener and a maid. After a while, Craig greets Mr. Harrigan and begins to read him a book. He continues to do so 3 times a week. The old man also gives Craig some lottery tickets as a bonus. Although Craig agreed to take the job initially for the money, he develops a strong and caring bond with Mr. Harrigan over the next 5 years. After getting to know the billionaire personally, Craig is also interested in finding out who he really is. So one day he goes to an internet cafe and looks for Mr. Harrigan. It turns out that the old man was a businessman who had a long list of employees who had complained about his character. Surprisingly, some of them were so tired of his ruthlessness that they did unthinkable things. However, this does not affect Craig's attitude towards Harrigan, and he continues to read him books and novels. The movie moves forward a few years, and now Craig is a teenager. He starts attending high school at a popular institution in the countryside. Unfortunately, Craig gets into trouble when on the first day of school, he makes eye contact with a bully named Kenny. During lunchtime, Kenny approaches Craig and casually asks him to shine his shoes. When Craig refuses, Kenny becomes very harsh with him. Luckily, before the situation escalates to a fight, the science teacher, Mrs. Hart, intervenes. Later that week, Craig has a conversation with Mr. Harrigan about the incident. The old man advises him that he should always be tough on bullies. It doesn't matter if it's at school or in business. Harrigan says that he himself lived this way. As Craig familiarizes himself with the relatively new social life at his new school, he realizes the importance of smartphones. In the school cafeteria, where all the cool and rich kids meet, the group of students with iPhones is considered the coolest. Wanting to fit in, Craig asks his father for an iPhone. Unfortunately, the old man immediately refuses, saying that the teenager should only focus on his studies. But on Christmas Eve, Craig receives another lottery ticket as a bonus gift from his employer, Mr. Harrigan. When he scratched it, he was excited to see that he won as much as $3,000. To make his day even better, his father finally gives him an iPhone for Christmas. Feeling overjoyed with the gifts he received, Craig uses his new iPhone to call Mr. Harrigan and thank him for winning the lottery ticket. They chat for a bit before parting ways for the night. The next day at school, Craig excitedly shows off his new phone to his friends. Then he goes to the cafeteria to join the cool kids, where the girl he has a crush on, Jennifer, is sitting. Craig tells us that he decides to give the old man an iPhone just like his, not only to introduce him to the new technology, but also so that they can stay in touch with each other wherever they are. So Craig buys a phone and politely gives it to his employer. At first, Mr. Harrigan objects. He says he doesn't keep such modern things around. He believes he will become dependent on them. However, Mr. Harrigan quickly changes his mind when Craig shows him the process of tracking stock prices in real time. He can also read the latest news, unlike newspapers, which report news a day later. Over the next few weeks, Craig teaches him new things to do with his smartphone. Mr. Harrigan becomes so engrossed in the device that he even loses interest in the books Craig reads to him. He just keeps flipping through his phone all day long. As the days go by, we see that Mr. Harrigan is starting to get sick. Because of this, he has to wear an oxygen mask at night. Unfortunately, tragedy soon strikes. One morning, when Craig visits the huge house as usual, he finds Mr. Harrigan lying dead from an illness related to old age. Since the housekeeping staff is on vacation, he panics and calls his father, who advises him to wait until the ambulance arrives. Until then, Craig tearfully reads the book to his close friend for the last time. In the next scene, Craig, his father, and several people from the community gather together for Mr. Harrigan's funeral. The teenager is devastated by the loss of his friend. He then decides to secretly place Mr. Garrigan's phone under the corpse's clothes. Shortly after the funeral, Craig and his father are approached by Mr. Harrigan's personal financial manager. They learn that the old man had left Craig a large sum of $800,000 to help him pay for college. Stunned by this large fortune, and out of genuine love and respect for the late man, Craig leaves a voicemail on Mr. Harrigan's phone. He confesses that he would give the entire sum to get his old friend back. Craig also leaves a text message mentioning how much he misses the time they spent together. From that moment on, things start to get unnatural. The next morning, Craig receives an answer, a very cryptic message from Mr. Harrigan's number. Frightened by this strange event, he tells his father about it, but the old man is firmly convinced that someone is playing a trick on him. Craig can't accept this explanation and insists on digging up Mr. Harrigan's grave, hoping to find him alive. His father clarifies the situation. It turns out that the old man was alone that day and died of a heart attack. The autopsy results confirmed this after a thorough examination of the body. Hearing this, Craig regains consciousness and accepts his father's words. As the days pass, Craig continues to grieve his loss, but he does not stop going to school. One day, when Kenny, a local bully, sells drugs, he is caught red-handed and expelled from school. Unfortunately, he mistakenly assumes that Craig was the one who reported him. So, on the day of the annual event, he sneaks onto the school grounds and beats Craig. However, despite all this, the latter still does not report it to the school principal. Instead, he reports it in a voicemail to Mr. Harrigan's number, apparently not expecting anything to happen. But to everyone's surprise, Kenny is soon found dead in an accident. Although it was reported that the bully was very drunk and fell out of his second-floor bedroom, we see his body with a can of shoe polish in his hand. This is terribly interesting because in Craig and Kenny's first interaction, the bully threatened Craig with a can of shoe polish. Meanwhile, Craig is going crazy because he now firmly believes that Mr. Harrigan's ghost killed the bully. Shaken to the core, he researches Mr. Harrigan's past and learns about a man who once worked for the billionaire, but was fired after he was caught stealing. A few days later, this man was also found dead, as were many other employees who had worked for Mr. Harrigan over the years. Craig is at a loss for words because he believes his former close friend was evil. He also decides to change his phone number by buying a new one. However, he decides to hide his old phone. For a while, everything seems normal because Craig graduates from high school and goes to college to study journalism in Boston. He says he is doing quite well in his studies. But then one day he gets a call from his father to tell him some shocking and sad news. It turns out that his high school science teacher, Miss Hart, tragically died in an accident. During his school years, Craig became very close to his teacher because she was the only one who gave him support and companionship in his time of need. Craig then returns to his hometown and finds out that Dean Whitmore, the man accused of the accident, was driving drunk. He had been arrested for drunk driving before. Although Craig and the other students want Dean to be punished for his reckless behavior, the court lets him off the hook by simply ordering him to undergo rehabilitation for 6 months. Angry that justice has not been served, Craig decides to take matters into his own hands. He recalls the unusual supernatural power he possesses, and without wasting any time, leaves a voicemail on Mr. Harrigan's number asking him to kill Dean Whitmore. The next day, Craig regrets his actions and hopes that no one will get hurt. He continues to check the internet to see if Dean is alive. Unfortunately, his worst fears are realized. Dean is found dead in the bathroom of the rehabilitation center. Now that he is fully aware of what is happening, Craig is even more frightened. He also begins to realize that he is technically guilty of murdering 2 people, Dean and the bully Kenny. After that, Craig visits Mr. Harrigan's house and starts looking for any evidence that seems supernatural. He doesn't find anything in the room, but when he opens a secret closet, he finds old photos of Mr. Harrigan. Craig has always questioned Mr. Harrigan's decision to hire him over the other guys. Some of them were better options for the position. Now he finally has an answer. Like Craig, Mr. Harrigan also lost his mother at a very young age, and that's why he favored Craig. In the next scene, Craig comes to the cemetery and starts talking to Mr. Harrigan's grave. He claims that he now understands the cryptic messages he received from the old man's number. In fact, it meant that Mr. Harrigan was asking Craig to stop contacting him. The main reason for this, according to Craig, was that Mr. Harrigan was hurt by these messages because he couldn't rest easy, or he didn't want Craig to get hurt because the young man was actually entering a mental state of anger and revenge. His old phone is the last means of communication between him and Mr. Harrigan. Finally, this phone is thrown into the lake. This puts an end to their paranormal discussions forever. Craig also wants to get rid of his existing phone, but is unable to do so because cell phones have become an integral part of modern life. The movie ends with another backstory where Craig expresses his wish to be buried with empty pockets after his death. Thank you for watching to the end. Subscribe to the channel and follow the news. Klontsak Recapped was with you. See you soon.